Okay, good morning and welcome to the Fusion HR webinar on leading an employee wellbeing strategy. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you're all well. Today's presenter is going to be Sue Jones. Sue is the Director of Wellbeing at We Are Wellbeing. They provide bespoke employee wellbeing solutions to organisations. Now, Sue has worked in this field for over 14 years and often provides training to business managers on the importance of the impact of wellbeing, both on staff morale, performance and turnover. So she's very well versed to take you through today's presentation, and we hope you enjoy it. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you do have any questions, please pop them on the Q&A and we will do our best to answer those either during or at the end. Don't be afraid to ask any questions. We are here to help. So without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Sue and begin the presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Sue, as been mentioned, and welcome to this morning's webinar on leading an employee wellbeing strategy. Okay, so what we're going to look at today, I'm going to do a little introduction to wellbeing for you. We're going to look at where to start with a wellbeing strategy, mindful that some of you might be in organisations where you haven't yet got a wellbeing strategy, or it might be something you're looking to do. So we're going to do a kind of where to start for that, as well as an introduction to basically doing a wellbeing strategy and starting that during a pandemic. So, using the situation that we're in as a platform for starting that. We're going to look at what could or should a wellbeing strategy include. And then we're going to look at how you review the effectiveness of that wellbeing strategy to keep it fresh and alive so that it evolves with the organisation and the people within it. Okay, so just to start off really as an introduction, we're going to look at what is wellbeing. So wellbeing is encompassed, as you'll know, it encompasses health, kind of the physical health side of things, and obviously the happiness side of things as well. But happiness has not been measured and still isn't measured in most organisations, and it's perhaps sort of epitomises the reason why we're in the situation that we're in a little bit. So traditionally the focus has been on physical health. And even though over the last few decades, there's been a broadening up to incorporate mental health, happiness actually has the closest correlation to performance, but this still isn't measured. And often what happens, as you'll know, in businesses and organisations, if something doesn't get measured, often you run the risk of it not being important or it doesn't matter. So it's important, and we'll look at that a little bit later, around the importance of setting the right KPIs or key performance indicators, so that you can really kind of hit the nail on the head with regards to your wellbeing strategy, making a difference to the people within the organisation. So really one of the things I wanted to emphasise, and one of the kind of first key points of a wellbeing strategy, is to acknowledge that wellbeing is everywhere, and it intertwines with all your other organisational strategies. In my view, and I can be a little bit biased, but wellbeing is one of the most important strategies. Because businesses are run by humans and we all have a degree of health and happiness, the wellbeing therefore dictates how effectively other strategies perform. So if we don't focus on wellbeing, we hinder our performance on the other strategies because they're run by our people. And if they're not looked after, they're not going to perform as well. Okay, so where to start with a wellbeing strategy? So although there's a lot of similarities between different organisations and the way that they might want to run their wellbeing strategy, it's important that it does have an element of being bespoke to your organisation and what's relevant. So it's important to understand the why. So why are you wanting to have a wellbeing strategy? What's most important for your people? Also what budget you've got to do that. So in order to write a strategy, you need to have an understanding of how much money you've got allocated towards implementing the strategy, so you know how kind of vast or limited you can be with regards to it. You must also look at what the employee needs are. So it's important to get an understanding. You've probably got one already, but just look at your data that you've got already around your people and what's important to them. As well as the business needs. So what's important to the business? So is there something around culture, or is there something around work-life balance or absent management that needs to be looked at? It could be physical fitness of the employees or mental fitness with regards to the ability to run the business or organisation. And then who's going to lead the wellbeing strategy? So it's important, and one of the things that we'll look at later is it's important for the wellbeing strategy to be owned at all levels of the organisation. However, it does need that guiding coalition of leadership. It needs to be believed by the leadership. It needs to be owned and directed by them, and also monitored regularly with regards to it kind of hitting the right spot and doing the right things. So one of the analogies that I like to use is that, wellbeing strategies aren't just about, free fruit and yoga. So we go into a lot of organisations, and sometimes, there'll be an exercise bike that, makes smoothies or, something weird and wacky like that. And you think, oh, that's fantastic. It looks like they're doing all the right things with regards to wellbeing. And actually that's the only thing that you've got. It kind of ticks the box with regards to looking like they're doing the right things, but not actually meeting, any kind of wider needs of employees. So a wellbeing strategy should look at all those key areas necessary to maintain staff physical and mental health. So it should look at management, it should look at culture, it should look at stress management, work-life balance, absent management and return to work, and physical and mental concerns of staff as well. And it's important that it's not done, those things aren't done in an ad hoc way. It's got to be, run throughout the organisation. People have got to be communicated with, so they're aware of what the wellbeing strategy does and how it's run, and that it really considers what the employees really need. So it's important to maintain that two-way communication between employees and leadership around what's important to them and what else might be useful, and to make tweaks and for the wellbeing strategy to evolve with the people. Okay, so in terms of introducing a wellbeing strategy during a pandemic, so obviously, we're in the situation that we're in at the moment, and for some organisations, I think it's the last thing that they're looking to think of, because they're looking at, how they respond to adjusting their working practices for the pandemic. But actually, it's a really good time to think about a wellbeing strategy. Essentially, there's never been a better time in terms of emphasising to your employees your commitment to wellbeing. And coronavirus can really be seen to kind of kickstart that new approach to wellbeing. So acting as a catalyst for change, acknowledging that we're in the situation that we're in, and actually the wellbeing and importance of our staff in running our organisations is integral, and acknowledging that as a platform in which to launch your wellbeing strategy. So leadership buy-in is really important, as with a lot of kind of change models and things like that you'll be aware of. So one of the ones that I've looked at kind of historically is Kotter's model of delivering change. And the most important aspect there, along with the need for kind of continual communication, is about that leadership buy-in. So leadership understanding the importance of their people, the importance of their health and well-being, and creating that guiding coalition to really lead staff through that, so that it then becomes embedded within the organisation's culture, and that this is the way that we do things around here. So obviously, because we're having to work a lot more virtually with the pandemic, it's important that we utilise technology in the way that we do things, as I'm sure many of you have been doing already. So where historically you would have done workshops, you could do virtual workshops, having ideas inboxes where staff can message in ideas and things that they want to focus on, or priorities for their view of well-being. Communication messages, creating those dialogues, and really get a sense of creating momentum and energy within the organisation around the importance of well-being and the fact that this is being done. So obviously wellbeing is really topical currently. So again, that gives us another kind of burning platform for change and the reasons why we should start to look at investing and developing the wellbeing strategy. And many employees will be keen to get involved and generate ideas for how things can be improved. So it's really important to harness this energy and involve those people that have that passion and want to get involved. There are many people that within organisations that are looking for development opportunities or have really good ideas around things, and others that just want to, you know, act as advocates for change. So they can be people that really help to enable buy-in to the strategy. And by involving as many people as possible, you prevent a very kind of top-down approach to embedding the strategy, or a very kind of bottom-up strategy where perhaps, you know, leaders aren't necessarily engaged, but people want to do it. And obviously the opposite, where it's a top-down approach, leadership are driving that, perhaps people don't think it's ticking the right boxes or achieving the right things. So it's really important to involve as many people as you can in developing what that wellbeing strategy looks like for your organisation. And that can include things like focusing around what are the, you know, the main aspects that you want to focus on. So is sickness a problem within the organisation? Now that could be looking at the absenteeism or the presenteeism around that. What are take-up rates of various communications that you have, click rates on things you can look at. If you've got an employee assist program, you could look at the take-up rates of that and start to understand your data. You may also have data around survey results if you do an annual employee staff survey. So there will be data that you've got that can give you a sense of how you're achieving on various things at the moment. And then you can benchmark that against others to give you a sense around what would be good to focus on. And if you don't feel like you've got enough, you can always do some focus groups with staff to say, you know, what do you think we should focus on, or what's important to you, to start to capture some of that data. So looking at the wellbeing responsibility and the strategy delivery. So it's really important, you know, particularly at the moment, that we have that focus on wellbeing. And one of the things that I wanted to add that's particularly pertinent to the education sector is that now's a really good time to start looking at your wellbeing strategy. The Department for Education is starting to measure school staff happiness under a voluntary wellbeing charter that's been introduced. And Ofsted are also starting to look at the wellbeing of teaching and educational professionals in their work as well. So it's going to be something that's looked at much more. So again, there's that kind of real kind of burning platform in order to do something around wellbeing and have that focus. There are a number of toolkits and things online. So the Department for Education has published a school workload and stress reduction toolkit. And there's also a framework that's available, and we can send you the links to all of those after this webinar so that you can take a look at what they are and what they mean for your organisation. So thinking about the success of a wellbeing strategy, so it's really crucial that action's taken and that improvements are made. And for employees to take the strategy seriously and not just view it as just another HR document that's going to be shelved, they need to see that real changes are being made in line with the strategy. So this means that all different levels throughout the organisation need to demonstrate new ways of working. They need to ensure that their attitudes and behaviours are helping to create a culture of improvement that focuses on well-being. So for that reason, you'll see that on the screen now is popping up all different levels of the organisation that have a responsibility for well-being and the delivery of that well-being strategy. So from an organisation point of view, that's around setting the policy and the strategy and facilitating and enabling that. It could be putting in training, it could be looking at kind of health and safety. And then from managers, it's got to be about employee one-to-ones, being able to build rapport with staff, spotting signs, particularly around stress or ill physical health, being able to make those reasonable adjustments and signposting. So we know that often people are said to not leave their job but leave their line manager, and so managers really have kind of a role in being a gatekeeper to how somebody feels. So what we see a lot of the time is that often line managers aren't trained to discuss anything to do with health and well-being. So make sure that your wellbeing strategy incorporates about training anybody up with regards to wellbeing and management responsibility, so that they're enabled and empowered to have those conversations about health, being able to identify when somebody's struggling or know when they can signpost them for support. So for that reason, we often at We Are Wellbeing we advocate the role of what's called a wellbeing champion within the organisation, and that's the layer that you'll see there between managers and employee. And this is really a go-to person for support. So it's somebody that's known within the organisation, or many people that are known within the organisation as your wellbeing champion. So they can be somebody that people can go to, that they know, that will help them in times that they need to support for, where maybe that, they don't feel comfortable going to their line manager for whatever reason. So this really helps to instill wellbeing into the culture of the organisation. And their role again is to support people, spot the signs, signpost and support people. And then obviously you've got the employees. So it's important that they understand that they've got a duty of care for their own health. So as well as the organisation obviously having that duty of care, the employees understand that they've got that duty of care, and that helps to enable that two-way communication between managers and leaders and the employees, and making sure that they understand the role in their health and well-being, but also the importance of being a compassionate colleague for when other people are struggling. So that can all be incorporated into the training communication around a wellbeing strategy. Okay, so what could or should a wellbeing strategy include? So it's really important that, as I kind of alluded to at the beginning, that you have all that the strategy runs throughout the organisation. So it's not just in the strategy level and then sits on a shelf, and it's not just at the tertiary level, which is where you see things that are being done, like the exercise machine that crushes fruit and makes nice smoothies. But you've got areas at all different levels of the organisation. So to talk you through that a little bit, the primary interventions are what we call, they really tackle the root cause of any issues. So if, for instance, your organisation has an issue with absence, you can really start to look at understanding what the reasons for that are, and then make your wellbeing strategy encompass so that it starts to alleviate those reasons. So for instance, it could be looking at amending the sickness policy, or it could be about enabling and empowering line managers to be able to support employees back to work better and things like that. Then you've got the secondary interventions. So these are interventions that they help employees deal with certain situations that cause stress or other forms of wellbeing issues. So this is usually either the role of the line manager or the role of those wellbeing champions that are there. They're enabled to help employees deal with those situations. It could be an employee assist program, and making people aware that that's there, looking at the take-up rates for that, what are the kind of common reasons why people would get in touch with that, and focusing around the areas around tackling the root cause of that and addressing it. So they're the things that people usually see in terms of help and support that's around. And then what we call the tertiary interventions. So these are usually the visual things that you see within an organisation. They're signposts, they're leaflets, making people aware of the different support that's there. It could be signs advertising fitness classes. It could be, the free fruit. It could be things just so that when you go into an organisation, you understand that there are things that are there that you can see that the organisation is focusing on well-being. But it is important to have them all at 3 layers to really embed that into the organisation culture and have that golden thread throughout, so that all areas are being tackled. So also I'd just like to say that we at We Are Wellbeing can supply a free insights questionnaire for your organisation. So where obviously a wellbeing strategy needs to focus on your particular metrics and what's important for your staff, one of the things that you can do is, you know, formulate a small number of people that's representative, and they can answer a questionnaire basically saying around what's important to them, what you've got already. It helps us to look at what the gaps are that you've got within the organisation and where you can really focus your wellbeing strategy. So if you'd like a little bit more of kind of bespoke help around how you'd like to, you know, where your organisation needs to focus, do just email us through at hello@wearewellbeing, and you can quote insight report and then in brackets fusion, if you want to make a note of that, and then we can provide something that really kind of helps you take off with that. So we have got a poll that Anne-Marie is kindly going to do, and it would just give me a sense of whether or not you've got a wellbeing strategy already within your organisation. So hopefully you should be able to see shortly pop up on your screen the ability to kind of vote on 2 questions. One is, there it is, whether you have a wellbeing strategy in place in your organisation. And the other is around whether you've got any KPIs, so key performance indicators for that.
Just waiting on a couple of people to vote for that first question. Just a few moments left. Well, that's really interesting. We've got 92% of people voted, and it's complete equal split between yes and no. So 50% have a strategy in place and 50% don't.
Right.
So that's really good. Okay, we'll go on to the second question.
It's like ask the audience on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
So that's question 2. Have you set any KPIs to manage your wellbeing strategy? Again, we'll just give everybody a few seconds to vote. Just a few more people to enter their choice, and then we'll be able to share the results. So the options being, yes, I've got KPIs in place. No, I wouldn't know where to start. Or I have a few objectives, but they're not documented or measured. Okay. I'll just share those results. There we are. So we've got quite a lot of people who just said that they wouldn't know where to start, 73%. And then 27% that they've got a few objectives, but it's not documented or measured anywhere. And 0 for yes, I have KPIs in place, which is not surprising. I think it's something that everybody does struggle with. So it's a good time to hand back to Sue to take you through how to set some KPIs.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so one of the things we usually recommend in terms of setting the KPIs is look back at previous data that you've got. So you could look back at over sickness records that you've got for previous years and collate how many sick days were lost in the last year. Some organisations look at the average salary of staff and then work out how much that costs the company. And then you can assess whether that changes. So that can then work as your benchmark, and then you can assess where that changes. So you could set a KPI for seeing, say, a 10% improvement in the number of sick days that are set, and then look at the ways in which you're going to do that. So to kind of bring an example to life for you, Avon and Somerset Police Service, they had a problem with staff sickness that was related to stress within the job. So what they really did around that was they looked at really promoting the role of the line manager as a support person to go to. So they trained up their line managers. They said within their strategy that they were going to focus around training up their line managers to be able to deal with conversations around stress and mental health. So some of them became mental health first aiders that were in line managers. Some people went on a mental health awareness course, and some people did courses around resilience and enabling two-way communication with staff. And then they looked at the take up of their employee assistance program, and it was actually really low. So a lot of organisations have a kind of financial agreement that they pay sort of £1 per person per head of the organisation, and they've continued doing that since, you know, years ago, and they just continue doing it each year, but then they don't look at the take up of that or the analysis of those results. So what are the main reasons why somebody got in touch with the employee assist program? So once you start to look at that data and say, oh, you know, take up was only, you know, 5%, and the main reason was, you know, stress, you've got that data, you know that there's a problem. You also know that utilization rates are quite low. So you could set a KPI about increasing the utilization of the employee assist program, which is there to obviously assist employees, help them deal with some of these issues, to enable them to stay in work or get back to work faster. And then you can set KPIs based on that. So then in terms of those, that, you know, the primary, secondary and tertiary, you've then got the emphasis of the primary being, you've got, you know, you've looked at the data and you've got that within the strategy, you know that that's important. Then you've got the secondary intervention where the managers have been trained around dealing with those situations. And you can also have your wellbeing champions or your mental health first aiders, or people that people go to. Sometimes they're identified on lists. Sometimes they wear, you know, certain colour lanyards, like bright pink lanyards, so people know where they are and who they are, so that they can go to them. And then you've got your tertiary interventions in terms of making people aware that things are in place. So at the Avon and Somerset Police Service, they used a mixture of different communication channels to promote their initiatives. They had a weekly staff newsletter, which emphasised the support that was available to staff. They had posters and flyers around the office. They had announcements in team meetings. They had posts on the staff intranet. They had lunch and learn sessions around different topics so that people could become aware around you know, mental health or managing stress, or on resilience, and they knew how to access and book onto these courses and lunch and learn sessions. And then they also did quite a lot about promoting and organising wellbeing events, so competitions, awareness themed events, just to really bring it to life that yes, there is an issue, yes, it is a challenging, tough job, that's nothing to be ashamed of, but we're really embracing that within the organisation. We've got all these things in place, we want to help you, and so that people were more enabled to come forward. And what they saw then was that the take up of their employee assist program, the number of line manager conversations that were taking about staff, both about stress, all increased. So they looked at them. They looked at the click rate on intranet posts, and those that were around stress had really high click rates because they started to acknowledge that. So where previously the kind of average click rate was quite low, because they then started to have this real focus around wellbeing, people started to engage with it and utilise the information that was there. And over time, that started to change the culture of the organisation, and they saw a change in these KPIs, with the sickness rate reducing. They saw presenteeism reduce, they saw absenteeism reduce, they saw the role of the line manager being much more important in their staff survey. So they had a question around how much you value your line manager, and that increased because people were obviously grateful of the support. So there's lots of different things you can assess, from take-up rates to sickness data to engagement, from staff forums. You can even have kind of mood checks. So some organisations have a daily or weekly kind of pop-up on your screen to ask just how you're feeling today on a scale of 1 to 10. And some organisations collate that data to see how people are feeling and how that changes when different interventions are put in place. So you can even get as kind of savvy and things around as that. So I'm just gonna, oh, the screen's frozen, sorry, bear with me. So once you've set those key performance indicators, quite quickly, and when you implement your strategy, you'll start to see changes. So you'll know whether you've set the right ones, basically. So don't be afraid to set something, you know, if you're not sure about how much increase you want to see, don't be afraid just to kind of pick a number and just see monitor how things change. So the wellbeing strategy has got to be an evolving document. It's not one of those that's just, you know, set in stone and then gets left. It's got to continually evolve with people's needs and the organisation needs. And the value of that is huge. So there's been a lot of research done on the return on investment of wellbeing strategies. One particular piece of research that was done by the British Heart Foundation suggested that investing in workplace health and wellbeing saw a return on investment of up to £34 for every pound invested. So it just shows the value that and the difference that it makes to have that investment there. So once you're reviewing your effectiveness of your wellbeing strategy, you can do that after anything sort of from a month onwards, and you can start to look at quantitative and qualitative data, so the numbers side of things and the kind of verbal side of things. So that could be in the form of you know, staff surveys that you've got. It could be looking at the sickness absence data or any engagement data you've got. You can always do focus groups as well, and pull a random sample of staff together and ask how they view the initiatives that have been put in place, so that you've got a view on whether those various actions that you've put in place have been successful, whether they know they're there, whether they're the right thing, things that they'd want done differently. And that gives you information that allows you to tweak it. So if something's not working, don't be afraid to find out why it's not working and what can be done to improve it. So you know, enabling that two-way communication with staff, as I mentioned earlier, to really say, look, we've put this in place, our emphasis is on reducing stress or on reducing sickness. What do you think can be done to improve it? So far we've done this, this and this. What else do you think we need to do? Or how do you think we need to do things differently? And by getting that buy-in and empowering people to inform the strategy and what's being done, they're much more likely to buy into it and create that organisational change. It's good to formally review your strategy annually. So even though you might be looking at it and looking at the data from time to time anyway, whether that's on a kind of weekly or monthly basis, it's good to have a formal review of that. It's really important because leaders have got to really own and drive the strategy. It's really important that senior leaders are involved in that process around what's working and what's not working. And that makes it easier to identify areas for improvement, and also much easier and quicker to make changes that are required. So that's essentially how you review it. Once then you've found changes that need to be made, you can do a kind of updated version of the strategy. You could, you know, post it onto the intranet or have it visible for people so that people can continually, you know, look at it and make suggestions and reasons for change. But sometimes it does have to be, you know, a little bit on trial and error as well. So don't be afraid to try something, see if it works, and then, you know, amend it accordingly. So having something is better than having nothing. Okay, so I hope that's given you, obviously we've looked a little bit around wellbeing, the importance of health and happiness, the importance of the wellbeing strategy and having KPIs and having the ownership and involvement at all levels of the organisation, as well as some examples around how that can be done. But I want to look to you guys to ask if you've got any questions. Some of you might have put questions on the Q&A, so I think Anne-Marie's kind of kindly come in to relay some of those, and we can go through any questions that you might have at this point.
If anybody has any questions, just literally click on the Q&A button, either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending how you're logged in. That's the one with the double speech marks. Maybe you just type any question into there, and then we can obviously look at those and share them with everybody that's on. I know that one of the questions we get asked most is about how they should actually document a wellbeing strategy, and do you have a template to do it, and where should I start? And I think that is always a big hurdle for everyone, is just literally knowing where you actually begin. And obviously we've gone through some of that today, but are there any sort of points in terms of the documentation that you could suggest?
Yeah, so I think Fusion HR have got a template that you can access and use, and that can be a good place to start. And then once you've got that, or even if you've got you know, a blank Word document, it's always good to look at what the situation is now. So rather than just trying to put pen to paper, access the data that you've got. So look at look at that data that you've got around staff sickness, that you've got around reasons for staff absence, that you've got around take up of employee assist programs, or main issues that people are aware of that come up, and they can be the start of kind of your kind of the basis for your wellbeing strategy. Then it's good to engage other leaders in that conversation. So rather than it just being kind of one-man job, have a discussion, a meeting or a workshop around what the focus needs to be. Because it's really hard if you're just sitting there on your own thinking, oh, I've got to write a wellbeing strategy for the organisation and I don't know where to start. So make it a joint effort. You know, the more brains that you've got, the more personal experiences people have had that they can draw on from one-to-ones with their staff, the more information that you're going to have around what are the kind of key gaps that we've got. So the first thing you've got to really look at is what are the gaps, what are the things that we're not so good at, and they can be your focuses for improvement. So it's a little bit of a kind of analysis work between what you've got, you know, kind of what your as is, and where you want to go in terms of your to-be model. Where do you want to be? And that will then enable you to start writing, you know, this is where we're at currently with this. We've acknowledged that we've got a gap in regards to helping people with X, Y, or Z. And what we've decided to do is have a real focus and drive around enabling the role of the line manager, or pushing the employee assist program, or investing in a staff counselling service, or it could even be, you know, awareness topics on, you know, type 2 diabetes, or anything that's kind of prevalent within, you know, a reason for kind of staff sickness that's come out. It could be anything that you can do. And then once you've got those priorities, then it's much easier to think about what are we going to do as an organisation to start addressing those. So once you know then where your focus is going to be, you can say, right, we're going to put these training sessions in place. We want to make the communication, we want to have weekly communication, we want to have training around this, we want to have buddy schemes, we want to have workshops, or we want to have, you know, focus groups, or one-to-one sessions, or closed door sessions where people can come and have confidential conversations, or we want to have wellbeing champions enabled throughout the organisation. And then it's once you've got your gap and your focus, then it's much easier to think about what you want to do as an organisation. And you can do those in group discussions as well. You know, it's always good to pick other leaders' brains around topics and come up with a leadership team thought process around what's important, and then do that. So they tend to be much more effective when they're done in groups, in terms of engaging the whole leadership team in that, and also engaging thoughts from employees as well, so what they think are important. So have those focus groups and engage their staff so that they ultimately buy into the strategy as well.
Great, thank you very much, Sue. Are there any questions for anybody before we go about perhaps, you know, have you got any stumbling blocks that you feel that are challenges now to being able to set up a wellbeing strategy and to be able to lead it and sort of begin the engagement with staff? Has anybody got any obstacles that they're facing? You can also pop that on either on the Q&A or on the chat. Just while we wait to see if anybody has got any questions, I'll just tell you a little bit about the support that is available for you that we can provide. So obviously, as Sue mentioned, we do have a wellbeing sort of strategy plan outline, which I will share after this webinar with you, which may help. We've also got a range of ad hoc wellbeing support that you can access in terms of counselling and occupational health. We can also, working alongside We Are Wellbeing, we can also offer physical assessments on site, wellbeing training, a whole range of sort of wellbeing activities and assessments. If you wanted to do something like that with staff to start things off. And I've also need to mention, obviously, that we do have, if you aren't currently tracking some of that data, we of course do have SAM, which I know a few of you looking down at the list here do have already, but we have SAM, Staff Absence Management Software, which of course you can get statistics from, so you can look at trends of when your absence peaks. So obviously you can then relate that to your wellbeing strategy. If you know you have more people off in a certain month, then you can then bring in various activities prior to that month to try and reduce that peak. And then there's also other things within that reporting, so you can look at if you're having a specific problem with absence with a specific team, perhaps, or a specific section of staff, so whether that's teaching staff or non-teaching staff or leadership team, or you know, it depends on how you operate, but within your reporting you can really drill down to where your issues actually are. And then obviously that means that then when you do your wellbeing strategy, you can actually put in effective actions that are going to be targeted to those groups or periods of time as and when needed. So I think it's important to look at, as Sue said, the data that you've already got before you start to sit down and plan everything, because you could put a load of lovely actions onto a piece of paper, but they might not be the right ones for your team. They might not be focused at the right people, or they might just be, you know, rather nice to haves rather than ones that are going to actually have an action. And I think as well, if you've got something like SAM, that, as I said, a lot of you I know have, or even our new system which is coming up, which is SAM People, which is a holistic HR system that will also have SAM incorporated into it from HR point of view, is to look at statistics like your absence rate, and look at how you can, you know, you take a picture of that right now, set your well-being, and then in 6 months go back to your well-being strategy, review it alongside your KPIs, which as Sue's mentioned, and say, okay, well, has our absence rate decreased? You know, if you don't know those stats at the beginning, as Sue's mentioned, you're starting from a blank point. So if it's something that you want to look at or explore further, then have a chat with the team about SAM and SAM people, and whether that can help you track these kind of things and track these incentives. We've also got a whole wealth of knowledge on wellbeing that is going on to our SAM Connect app, which if you haven't benefited from yet, might be something you can put into Wellbeing Strategy. It's completely free till September. And if you're a SAM client, it will be free afterwards as well. So if you haven't already got that set up, please do. It's an app that can be downloaded by employees. You can share wellbeing information and other school news on the app. So it's a really good way of bringing that into your wellbeing strategy and being able to push that out to employees. We've got a question from Sarah that's just come in, so I'll read this out now. So can you explain a little bit more about the insight questionnaire? I'm just wondering what would happen if we accessed it? How do we get results? Is this just an internal tool? What does it exactly do?
Yeah, of course. So I've just popped back to the slide there that mentions it at the bottom there. So what it is, we've got a tool called Get Feedback, and it's totally confidential and anonymized results. And I think that, there is something in the fact that it's coming from an independent source, that staff are a lot more kind of trusting about the fact that, it's not going to track their responses. You can actually make we have basically a list of 15 to 17 questions, but you can make it bespoke to your organisation. But a lot of them ask around what they see as their kind of priorities for health and wellbeing. It looks at what you've got already within your organisation. So it asks questions around, are you aware of whether the following are available within your organisation? So it'll mention things like counsellor service, employee assistance programme, training courses, things like that, so that we can start to get a sense of what's present within each organisation. There's some that are free text fields, so it asks for their views around what they'd like to see done differently with regards to wellbeing. So it starts to capture some of those ideas. And there's also information around that, what that individual, what they would find particularly helpful in terms of managing their own health and wellbeing. So we list some ideas, and then there's another box as well. And people can tick as many of those as they like, to give an indication of what that is. And then we put that in a nice report for you. It can go out to as many or as few people within your organisation as you want, but obviously the more the better, the more representative it will be of the organisation's thoughts. And then it's completely free, and we come back to you and say, these were the priorities for your organisation. So it almost negates the need to have, a focus group and things like that. And it can be done, every so often, so that you can compare the results as well. But it is good to do that in line with looking at other data, like those sickness reports and things like that, so that you can, get an all-encompassed view. But it gives you a really good sense, and it's always good if you haven't got a wellbeing strategy yet at the moment, because it starts to really identify those gaps for where you can start to focus on, as well as giving you some ideas of which to put in the wellbeing strategy. So definitely for those of you that either don't yet have one or don't have any KPIs, it would be really helpful when helping you to start to get writing and get going with developing that. So do just get in touch with us at that hello@wearewellbeing email address, and we'll send you a link, and you can then send that out to other people within the organisation, or you can give us a list of names and we can send it out to the people that you want us to send it out from. So it can be managed either way, and then there's a very quick turnaround within just a couple of days to get the results back to you. Obviously, if you want to leave it longer, if some staff are part-time and things like that, to allow them to answer, it can be any length of time. So you can say, oh, we'd rather have 3 weeks, to allow people to respond, and then we'll get back to you after that. So it can be, planned according to your requirements.
And I think what we'll do is, as I said, we will send out an email following this webinar, which will have the links on that you can access, and we'll include that as well. just to try and help you along the way. It sounds like a great resource, and I would encourage you to make the most of that. We are working alongside We Are Wellbeing and to try and develop a wellbeing package. So please watch this space for further information on that. And there are also videos on our website which you can access, and lots of blogs as well, which we're now featuring on our website. So please do have a look. Follow us on social media as well, because we're often sharing useful information, not only ours but also from our partners like We Are Wellbeing, to help you move things like Wellbeing Strategy along and to get the benefit of that, and obviously to get ready and up and running, get everybody starting with a great return from September onwards. So all that's left really, unless anybody's got any further questions, and I don't think there are at the moment. No, we hope you is to say thank you. Thank you to Sue for presenting to us today. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that. And also thank you to you all for coming along and listening and participating in our webinar. We do have a couple still left for this term, including demonstrations of SAM and SAM people, if you want to look into those, and also a health and safety one ready for September as well. So if you'd like to have a look, go to our training page. I will send the link out on the follow-up email, and try and make the most of this time that we have ready to prepare for a great start back. Okay, so take care and enjoy the rest of your day.